Welcome to Adapting, the show where we discuss adaptations of various forms. My name is Tom, and with me is...
That.
So a few weeks ago, I was watching a video in which Stanley Fish, the famous literary critic, argued against what is called the Western canon. He went on a rant about conservatives among modern language professors who were attacking him about creating new works and putting them on the canon that shouldn't be there. And although I wasn't not interested in listening to a rant, be it conservative, progressive, pescatarian, or otherwise, Fish did bring up a very interesting point. His point was the idea of the Western canon that includes so-called vulgar languages, Italian, English, Spanish, French, is in essence a progressive tendency in education. Throwing out exclusivity of Latin and Greek and sometimes Hebrew study in favor of German, French, English, Spanish, Italian, etc. is something new in the 19th century. This idea was languages like Latin and Greek were official, those other languages were not worth study. And upon a survey of the history of modern language departments in Europe and America, I realized, in fact, the importance of Fish's argument, not only to the idea of
True,
forming...
yeah. I mean, he's not
Yeah,
wrong. Yeah.
he's absolutely right. Yeah, the idea of forming a literary canon is something kind of new if you're going to include non-classical or non-biblical texts. And that's why you see Modern Language Association comes into existence in 1883 in order to find a means of teaching people literary works.
I would have to say that I think that might be a little over. You can take it a little far. Like I think certain, by especially at the end of the 19th century, I think certain writers had achieved comparable status, but it was a relatively limited number. It was like Shakespeare, Dante.
Hmm.
Like
It,
you're looking at a
yeah,
limited list. I
it
think
was a
that would
limited
have been considered
list,
comparable.
but they were not in the academy. And they were not being they were not part of the official. There was nothing official about it, right? And
No, no, no. I
yeah,
mean, true.
so you wouldn't be teaching, very almost never would you teach Shakespeare, except in oratory or rhetoric,
Oh,
right? And this
interesting.
is
Okay.
kind of where modern language comes out of, oratory or rhetoric. It's the same for Dante. It's the same for Milton. Eventually, these people start filtering in, but it's not until I think 1872 is when Oxford gets an English professor. It is 91, I think 1891, when Harvard does. And basically what happens with the Modern Language Association, and we could go on to this, I have a lot more information on this if we get into this in the episode, basically tries to find a way of incorporating Shakespeare, Milton, Dante into education, into the academy, because up to then their greatness was actually something outside of scholarship, right? Which is kind of interesting that the public maintain their greatness, not scholars or people educating others.
I find it interesting if you no, I just because I find it interesting because maybe it's true, but there certainly are sort of lectures that are being done by individuals on some of these
There
topics, right?
are, right? The Bell's lecture thing, the idea, and you could see this in somebody like Ruskin or in Walter Pater, if you think of the Stones of Venice. That was a popular thing, and people would go around and give lectures on Shakespeare, let's say,
Yeah,
or
but those weren't
letters.
considered academic. Those were
They
considered
were not,
popular.
I suppose, well, they're not being housed by academic institutions. They're not
Okay,
part of
fair. Yeah.
education.
So no,
Right?
yeah. I mean, then they're not
Yeah. Or
academic because they're
Coleridge.
definitely
Coleridge has great stuff on Shakespeare.
done Shakespeare. Yeah, this is interesting. Well, because what I was thinking is, and now you're right. Now that I'm thinking about it more and more, you're right. I was thinking someone like Dostoevsky does a really famous. It's not a lecture, but he does a very famous speech right before he dies on Pushkin, and sort of rejuvenates Pushkin in some ways. And this is sort of like a major moment for Dostoevsky. So I'm like, well, they clearly were talking about them, but you're right. It's more of a popular sense, not in the academic studies were fairly closed, and so you wouldn't study them. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. You would study them in, let's say, Germany. Germany was a little more advanced in this sense, but that was because of linguistics. It was called philology before it was called linguistics. And so you would see a lot of people, and Germans basically invented linguistics. So the study of modern languages was there to look at how language evolved, not, let's say, the themes or content of any individual work. That I think was really left open to the public. I mean, even going back to the 18th century, the great essays on literary figures such as Shakespeare was Samuel Johnson, Dr. Johnson, who just generated it himself and published it. The idea of universities doing this, they were a place for the learning of Greek, Latin, and Hebrew on occasion. That was not something that was going on. Um, and I only bring this up not necessarily to completely sidetrack us, though I think it's part of an interesting conversation we could have about this work, which is Frédéric Mistral's epic Provence poem Miria, which is written in the Provençal language Occitan, which is either an independent language or a dialect of French. If you're really into this language, it's an independent language. If you're not, it's a dialect of French. And this poem, as well as the work of Mistral, if you research Mistral's biography, this poem was written to promote the use and beauty of the Occitan language in defiance of an effort on the part of the French government, this thing called vergonha, which was a term for a long process of eliminating from France regional languages like Occitan.
Every country's doing that in the 19th century. They're all
Yeah,
doing that.
they went back a little longer than that. I mean, you have to think the French Académie is an early 17th century structure that was designed to enforce not only dramatic rules. If you study the history of theater, the Académie had very specific rules for how plays went, but also to enforce a sort of French standard. I think France was more aggressive in this than other places. And
Russia's very aggressive in it.
are they? I don't.
Oh
I know
yeah.
the history of Russia less well.
Yeah,
Um,
Russia's very aggressive on this
mm,
front. That's and especially in the 19th century. The main reason being, I mean, they might have been doing it before that, but it's a huge problem in the 19th century because of essentially nationalism, emerging nationalism. And one of the major definitions that emerges in the 19th century for a nation is it has its own language. And it has to be a language with a history of literature. So it can't. So that's why, like, one of the main reasons, for example, there's no major nationalist movements for Ukraine in the 19th century. There is, but it never really takes off because Ukraine is arguably a different language, Ukrainian, but they don't have like an old literary tradition. Poland does. So there's not much. No one is really arguing that Polish is Russian or that it's not a nation because it has a long literary tradition. It's really big in Ireland, like it's all over a lot of these kind of countries. But Russia in particular, because it has all these polyglot, multilingual nation within sort of especially with the Balkans and Eastern Europe, the western boundaries of Russia, it's a huge thing there to sort of stamp out national languages and to try to remove them and say like Belarusian is just the white Russians. That's just Russian. It's a dialect. Ukrainian isn't its own language. It's just a separate. It's just a dialect of Russian. They try to do it all over in Russia. It's big there.
mhm. It seems to be big in France as well at the time of this writing. This poem was written between 1852 and
Yeah.
1859. So what happens in 1852 is Napoleon III comes into power, and there's this idea of we have to make a French empire with a kind of French culture. It's also the history. This is the era of nations. This is where the
Yeah,
nation effectively
this
gets
is
invented.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. This is
Italy,
nationalism, and language is so closely tied up with this
yeah,
movement.
exactly. I mean, Germany becomes its own country in early 1870s. Italy, arguably America, becomes a country in 1865, but before it was a sort of confederacy on the Atlantic. Now
Well,
it
that's
is,
the argue the famous is that before the Civil War, apparently, they would say the United States are this, the United States are that. After the Civil War, that's when it becomes the United States is
mhm,
something.
yeah. And so this poem, though I struggled to enjoy reading it, I'll just put that forward. I feel, Pat, that you might have had a similar reaction. I
I
decided
would
that,
say it is kindly called a slog. That is the
yes, that was.
that is the kind word for this
Mhm,
poem.
mhm. But I do think because of a number of reasons, I wanted to do it anyway. Number one is it's written to promote a regional dialect at a time that's super interesting historically for the promotion of regional dialects, when language and nation building suddenly becomes really interesting. I also think it is very interesting because up to this point, our look at what is the Nobel Prize Committee doing in this first generation of Nobel Prize winners seems to be fairly backward looking. There's this concept of ideals and celebrating ideals or whatnot. This seems to be a little bit more, I would say, spicy and a little bit more politically charged and doesn't necessarily fall into that comfortable conservative fold that a lot of the other works of the Alverson, the first chair committee of the Nobel Prize in Literature, that
It
his
doesn't its subject matter, I would say.
it
You're
doesn't its
totally right.
subject matter, yeah.
You're totally right. The decision, I mean, they're clearly that's not what they're interested in. But the subject matter is would fit very well with that theme. But clearly, I don't think that's why they're giving it. They're giving it because of the language he's writing in.
Yeah, and Alverson, again, the chair committee, he does say this in his nominating speech. So for those reasons, I wanted to bring it forward, and I think it is also a very interesting question, especially about the invention, I would say, of modern language value that I think is also going on in the 19th century. This poem just touches, it clicks a lot of boxes. Can you click a box? Clicks a lot of buttons. It checks a lot of boxes. There we go. And I think for that reason, even if the content can be, as you said, kind of a slog, it is worth talking about in this larger conversation about the Nobel Prize. And that's why I kind of wanted to do it. This poem, as we said before, as I said a few times now, is Miriot. Its author was Frédéric Mistral. Um, and he himself, Mistral, was born in 1830. His parents were very poor. He was born in southern France in Milan. He studied law at Aix in Provence, and he immediately, while studying law, became an activist for Provence independence. And he was part of that kind of movement, and he became a central figure there. His teacher at law school was this guy, Joseph Romanel, who was his kind of political effort, Romanel's, was to revive the Occitan language, the language they spoke in Provence. And he established a regional language association for that, Rommel as well as Mistral, in 1854, which promoted Occitan. Later, Castilian was also kind of put into that fold. This organization, I will call it Filbriga, I think is how they pronounce it. It's interesting, no one actually knows what that word means. It's just sort of a random Occitan word that they selected for the name of this organization. And in fact, it still exists and is still publishing things today. For this organization, Mistral's big work was an Octane dictionary written between 1876 and 1886 that he compiled. This work, Miriot, he started in either 1851 or 1852. Which he completed and published side by side with a French language version in 1859. It was the second edition that got noticed because it was published in Paris. That's probably why. The first edition was, I think, published in Avignon. And despite the pretense of being for the common person, it was actually the French intellectuals who kind of heralded the book and promoted it and
What
celebrated
a
it.
surprise that people didn't want
Yeah.
to read this thing.
So in Off
Is it
Versen,
is it rhyming couplets in the French?
so this is the rhyme scheme in French. It's a 7 line stanza, and it is A B C C A B. So
So
yes
that's
and
probably
no.
why it's at least a little more tolerable.
Yeah, sometimes it's A B C C C B,
But it's
but
not just A B B C C
no,
D
no,
D
no.
E.
It's
Oh my gosh.
in the octan. It isn't. No.
Rhyming couplets are the worst, and especially when you do them for just thousands and thousands of lines. It
Yes.
also is just like, I mean, the one of the issues with this thing is I agree, it's fascinating to discuss it, but as a piece of literature in English, it, how closely is this thing actually representing what was in the other language? Because the translation we had is all rhyming couplets, so A B B C C D D. And obviously, in order to get that to work in English, particularly, French, I think, is a little more forgiving. I think they tend to have more vowel endings and things like that. But so to get that to work in English, you have to jump through inordinate hoops to get that to work. English just is difficult to get to rhyme because we have so many endings on our words. So what hoops this guy had to go through to get this translation to work and how closely it resembles the original is a huge open question. I can't imagine what it actually was like. And it just
Yeah,
gets so repetitive.
it's
Those
hard. Yeah, the English translation, the one we read was Harriet W. Preston, who did it pretty quickly after. And she moved it from decasyllabic lines to 10-syllable iambs, with obviously rhyming couplets, as you said, and from 7 to 6 line stanzas. And it's like you said, it's rough. It's
it's rough.
the
It's a hard read,
yeah, it's really
especially in the beginning. It is a it's a slog. The first like two cantos, I mean, I thank God it got more interesting because at first I just thought, are they just gonna spend I thought if this is like Bjornstjerne and Bjornson, they're just gonna sit here for just pages and pages and pages being like, and then the three suitors showed up and then they got mad at them and then he learned to not be angry anymore as they went to church and learned to farm. Like that would be Bjornstjerne and Bjornson's thing, and it would just be like, my God, I can't do this for this many cantos.
so this is the second stanza of the first canto, the second stanza. What though youth's a royal was her only crown, and never gold she wore, nor damask gown? I'll build her up a throne out of my song, and hail her queen in our own despised tongue. Mine be the simple speech that ye all know, shepherds and farmer folk of lone La Croix. And it goes on and on like that
Yeah, I
for
mean, I just opened a random page like, fixing a troubled eye on the old man, Vincennes to Master Ambroy thus began, the while a mighty wind the poplars bending, its howl unto the poor lad's voice was lending. I am mad, father, as oft of late have said, thinkest thou I'm jesting when I say it? It's like, gotta get that late rhyme, sate. Like, I mean, it's very difficult.
it's
And
very
obviously, I mean, if you're reading it not intentionally jamming those end lines, you could probably make it a little more interesting. If you got to do it like you're gonna do Moliere and just not hit the rhymes. But it's hard when it's thousands and thousands and thousands of lines. It's just it's like a you're like, it's so long. So I don't know. So it's that the only reason I asked what the rhyme scheme was because the rhyme scheme in this is intolerable.
It is. Yeah, the original has a lot of feminine endings, so it does push out the verse very often. It does a lot of slant rhymes. The translation does a lot of slant rhymes as
You just
well.
love slant. You
They
have to. I
just
mean, you have
feel
to do a lot of slant
forced
rhymes. Yeah.
though, but
I mean,
um
late and sate. Sit. I mean, like, yeah, I get it. She was. I didn't realize a woman who translated, but fine. She's clearly just like, okay, I just need to move on. Late and sate, but there's just so many of them, and and I don't mind the slant rhymes. It's fine, but it's even it's almost the ones where it does rhyme really well that are almost worse, like bending and lending. It's just they're very hard to read for hours on end.
yeah, it is. And she actually mentioned in her assessment, the introduction to this of her translation, she showed an example of it, an early example of her translating, and she said, doing this for 12 cantos would be intolerable. Go, okay, but you didn't get much better.
You didn't improve.
You didn't, this is not, yeah, and it just
I
seems
didn't
like,
read the introduction. I
yeah,
couldn't. I mean, I didn't read it, but yeah, it's intolerable.
it is intolerable. We should maybe give a brief plot summary of it?
Yeah, yeah. Go
Yeah,
for it.
we should
It
do
gets
that.
better. It does. It got better. It does. It is
Yeah.
not just. There's some sections that are actually fairly interesting. Let's do the plot summary, and then I'll point out the sections I kind of liked.
Okay, so the plot follows basically a southern French farming village, and
Damn farmers.
Muriel is the daughter of a wealthy farmer. She falls for Vincent, who's a poor weaver. The father doesn't approve of this, Ramon,
Oh,
right?
what a shock.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so they
couldn't
can't
have
get
seen that one
together.
coming.
Um,
Mistral.
and then
Shocking us with your plot twists.
Reyes is this bull tamer who's really good at taming cattle. He likes her. He gets into a fight with Vincent over it, stabs Vincent with an iron trident of all.
But when I read that, I literally went, what is his trident? Then there must be some sort of metaphorical meaning here. And then I'm like, oh no, Vincent is dead, so I guess it was a real trident. Like, why does he have a
But
trident?
doesn't he heal?
Well, he does, yeah,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
they
okay.
say he's dead.
Oh,
In the
okay.
poem, they say
hmm
he's dead
hmm
because the whole thing is that the
The
whatever his name is,
witch.
yeah, he thinks that he's dead. He thinks that he murdered him. But I thought, why does this? But it just said the way it phrased it. I'm like, oh, I must be
Missed something.
missed something like this, or I thought it was metaphorical. I thought there was some, what I actually thought, because again, is as you said, your mind tends to wander during this. And so I thought, oh, this is him imagining it. I thought that the guy, because Vincent has basically beaten him down. I think he literally gets his like foot on his throat. And so I thought, and then he walks away, and I thought, oh, he's imagining killing him. Because I thought, oh, that's what the rest of the poem is going to be. Is this guy's going to get angry with them? And I thought, well, this is still predictable, and he's going to get mad at them. And I thought this is the equivalent of like walking away being like, I'm going to get him next time. I wish I had a trident. I'd stab him with my that's what I thought was going on. And then I'm like, oh no, he's actually did have a trident for some reason.
He's Aquaman.
But why does this man have a
I don't know.
trident?
I was very confused. I was
And then I thought this is probably just a poor translation thing, you know.
well, in the
Well, the problem is in the movie they do have a. I think in the movie they have a
Trident
trident
is
too. So
also
that
mentioned.
was yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah.
I yeah.
All right, so he stabs the dude with a trident.
He gets better after visiting Taven, a witch, and then he goes away, and then Miro, um, goes after him into this kind of hot climate. And because she forgot her hat, she dies of sunstroke. Has a vision of the three Marys and then, collapses and dies. The moral of the story is remember
Wear
your
your
hat.
hat.
So that's
It's
that's
funnier in the
that's
movie
that.
because you just go, I have no idea why she's dying. There's a
It's
black
true.
and white photo of, but they're all black and white photos behind her. They all look pretty desolate. Why is she dying?
Yeah, they don't. I looked through the libretto. I don't think they mention it. Maybe they meant, it's just she's
I
just
think you're
dying
meant
of
to.
sadness, I think is the.
Yeah, I didn't really get why she
Mm.
died. But no, we'll get to the movie. We gotta get to the movie later. Get to the movie later. Let's finish the
Uh,
book.
well, that's it, basically,
Well,
right?
yeah. I mean, the things that are really there's a really good. I actually this is where I went. Oh wow, I kind of like this now. Was the sequence after? How are we going to pronounce the murderer's name?
Oh, Aurier,
Aurier. Okay, we're gonna go with Aurier.
Aurier, Ourrais, Aurier.
Aurier. Gonna go with that. Um, So I was pronouncing it Arias, which is just
That's
that's in my
fine.
head. Nope, but we're gonna go with Aurier. So Aurier. There's a sequence after Aurier has left. He thinks he's killed him with his trident, and he's running away because he's murdered someone. And he's running and he comes across a bunch of like people, fishermen on a river. And he says, "Let me on your boat. I just need to cross the river." And they say, "Okay, we're leaving in a second. Hop on, really get up here quickly." So he gets on the boat. And then the boat starts going across the water. And I loved that sequence because all these basically spirits and ghosts and fairies start attacking the boat. And the guy basically says, and you don't know by right at this point that Vincent is actually alive. He isn't dead. You think he's dead. And they start saying to Oreo, you need to get off the boat. They're stopping us. You can't cross a river after you've murdered someone. I just love that as ideas like a folk thing of a person can't cross a river after they've murdered someone. I think that's a great idea for like a modern short story or something like that of a man who can't cross a river after he's committed a murder. Like I love that just notion of a folk thing. And then he basically is like, I didn't murder anyone. I didn't murder anyone. Why would you say that? And then they say, "Oh no, it's not that. You're right. It's because this is like a Night of the Spirits attack. I can't remember the exact details." And then they're basically like trying to get across this river with all these river spirits attacking the boat, and then they sink it, and he dies. It's a really creepy, well done sequence, and especially after you have now gone through like 150 pages of the shepherd and the lady lay in straw, and while looked, and then he thought he saw. You've done like line after line after line of this, and then you're like, oh wow, there's like river spirits murdering people on a boat. Like, wow, that got interesting. It's it's actually pretty good. Right? I mean, that's a really cool sequence. And the other sequence I kind of liked, it reminded me of the Aeneid, actually, is when they go to the witch. The witch is like, okay, I have to take you down to my cave, to my cauldron, and she starts guiding them through the cave as they're like carrying the body of the dying Vincent. And she basically is like, these are all the spirits. These are all the spirits that live in this cave that used to come out all the time, but they can't anymore since I think it's like since people started saying their prayers or something, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know. I
It's
remember the
literally said
spirits,
it's
but I don't know if
yeah,
that's the justification.
it said that they can't leave the cave because now people say their prayers. And since people I think it said now that people pray to Mary or something very
Oh,
specifically. It's
that
like
might be it. Yeah.
and I
Yeah,
think it
there's
said like now that people pray to Mary, they can't leave the cave. Every time someone says a prayer to Mary, they have to go back to this cave. So all these spirits are trapped in here, and they're all these mischievous spirits that just kind of manage to occasionally eke out of the cave to do some mischief, but then they get sent back again because someone says a prayer. And I like these sort of like local folk myths. That's actually really interesting to me. I found that to be a good part of the story, an interesting part of the story. It made me kind of get over a little bit, and then it kind of goes back to her dying in the desert, and then you're kind of just going, well, that was fun, but now it's done, as Daniel Tiger would say. So it's just like this sort of entertainment aspect of these supernatural things that are happening inside the caves is quite fun. I liked that. I liked the river spirits. I liked the cave things like that. It had a very Orpheus kind of feel to it, and it had this sort of very classic Greek density to it that I liked. But then he just stops.
yeah. Yeah, he is clearly invoking the Aeneid. He's invoking Homer specifically at one point when
I
he
didn't remember that, but
calls
again,
to
you have
sing.
there's a huge tendency to zone out, right? I mean,
Mhm.
you have to. It's hard to
It's
not.
really, really hard to pay attention to this. He kind of invokes Homer at sing of the love of a provincial maid at the beginning. There's
Oh,
things
I
like
guess I did.
that.
Yeah, I do remember that. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
that type of thing. But I agree with you. There is another scene towards the end when she's dying and she ends up having a hallucination. She's trying to go to this chapel. I don't remember why, because as we've both been saying, you check out so much when reading this because of the rhyme. You just lose. I've read two or
You
three
lose all sense of
pages.
meaning. You lose all sense of meaning, and it's not like a Ulyssian sense of like I struggle reading Ulysses. You have to really work at it, but it's not because of the density of the text. It's because of the circumlocution of the phrasing. It's just it's this very awkward phrasing to get the rhymes. So
Yeah, it's
you just lose track of huge pages.
yeah. If you've ever read a technical manual and realized that the eighth step you don't understand because you just glossed over the sixth step, then you will have a sense of what it's like to read this poem.
Yes.
But anyway, she's going to this chapel towards the end of her life, towards the end of the poem, and there's this long hallucinogenic vision of the three Marys from the gospel stories and of Christ's death and whatnot. And her name means Mary. It's a Provençal word for Mary. And that's a very like freaky kind of hallucinogenic scene where they introduce her to the Christian story. I guess not introduce, but show her again the Christian story and that type of thing. And that's also really bizarre and kind of fun. Um, and I think it complements those earlier things that you mentioned, the kind of more pagan type things that are going on. That it ends or closes out with this Christian hallucinogenic moment as opposed to these kind of pagan or woodland hallucinogenic moments. And I thought that was valuable as well. In terms of the provincial customs, I know at one point there was a race to win a plate of pewter.
I was confused
Yeah, I
on, and and even the thing with the
Mhm.
silk bugs. There seem to be a lot of jokes about silk bug cocoons,
Yeah,
which I didn't understand.
I think they're cultivating
Yes,
silk
I
bugs.
understood what a silk cocoon was. I just didn't know I needed so much
Um,
obscure information or unintelligible information about the
yeah, yeah. Uh,
cocoons.
mm.
It
Yeah,
seemed to be
this
a game or a joke or something, right? They seem to
mm.
be making fun of her or something, right? But about
They
the
are at one
cocoons?
point. Yeah, they are making fun of her, and there's a few. That's when you have a few sort of actual humans that are identified amongst the crowd that jump out and say things about her. I think there is this joke that she's being um sexually forward when in fact she isn't. I think that's part of what they're
Yeah, I would
joking
agree. Yes,
about.
I think
She's
that's
like,
was
I've
yeah.
never even given him a kiss or something like that. That seems to be what's going on.
Here's the
Uh,
line, by the way. I found the one, which again, I thought I liked this idea. It reminds me of when we get to Kristen Lavren's daughter. It reminds this is I was like, oh, this is very much a Kristen Lavren's daughter kind of concept. It's the line, so it's the line about the spirits being locked in the caves, and it just says, a hole flush with the rocks by lizards haunted and veiled by tufts of rosemary thereby planted. For ever since the holy Angelus swells in Mary's honor from the minster bells, the antique fairies have been forced to hide from sunlight and in this deep cavern hide. And I love that, and again, this is where the poem, now, obviously, intentionally, I'm not hitting the end rhymes because I think it reads a lot better when you don't hit the end rhymes. Um, and you don't hear them as much, and so they do kind of blend fairly well. But I just love that concept. I love this concept that, and this again, when we get to Kristen Lavrans's daughter, she's what, 1928? Um, Sigurd Undset, I think, is 1928. So in 1928, 20 episodes from now, assuming we can, maybe a
in the
little less.
winter, yeah.
There's probably a few, we could probably cut out a few philosophers in there, but although we're keeping Henri Bergson, I think he wins in this. Keeping Henri Bergson,
Like
so
22 or something
yeah,
like
he wins.
that.
He wins before her. So
Mm.
anyway, so we've got a lot of episodes before we get to Kristen Lavrans's daughter. But
Mm.
Kristen Lavrans's daughter has opens with her seeing the fairy, right? And there's this whole
Yes.
concern of the pagan sort of fairy world and this sort of Christian world. And that's fun. Like that's a good dichotomy of provincial life. And as you said, there's this. I honestly didn't pick up on the Mary thing. I think I was done by that point. So I didn't notice that. And you're right, there is clearly a parallel being set up there. But I just think these idea of these local pagan sort of superstitions and just these ideas are really fun. And I think that's the best part of the poem is that sort of stuff.
Yes. Yeah. The best part of the poem is that. Yeah, I agree. I think those passages in particular. I love that passage you mentioned about what's his name on the boat trying to
Yeah,
get away and
it's really
drowning.
good.
That's
That
really good.
whole canto is
Mm.
excellent. It's
Yeah.
excellent.
Mhm. Yeah, that's the I think that's the midway point in the poem, which
It's
is a
about it's
great
just like
way,
yeah.
like kind of close. You can imagine the middle curtain, the curtain in the act closing, and so that's a really good moment. I think it ends fairly well. I think her like trapped through the desert, even though it's kind of stupid that she does it not wearing a hat. The that whole episode is really kind of a hallucinogenic type of thing. Um, and and yeah, and that stuff is kind of cool. It's presented early on as quaint village life with
Yeah.
a bunch of people running around and doing farming thing, and it's sort of an
And that's why
idealized.
it's intolerable. That's
Yeah.
that's where it feels like it feels like the stuff that Shakespeare is making fun of and As You Like It.
Hmm.
That's what Shakespeare's making fun of. And I thought, my
Yeah.
God, no wonder he made fun of it. This is intolerable.
Yeah.
Uh and so it is difficult to read it, but then it does start getting, and again, it sort of has the feeling of a Bjornstjerne Bjornson, but just in rhyming couplets. Like I could Bjornstjerne Bjornson, I can kind of put up with his provincial thing and the farming and that stuff. I can sort of put up with it because his prose is fairly sparse and sort of stark, and it has this sort of modern quality to it. This is like reading the Iliad, but just talking about how they need to feed the troops or something. Like it just in the beginning, it just has this insanely dull quality, and then it does wake up.
Yeah, and I think it's that insanely dull quality he actually thinks is extremely valuable. I think that's why there's so much of it, because I think what he is trying to do is that's like the soul of these people. It's one of those types of things. Like that's the impression I get is that this is
But that's what Bjornson was doing
is
too.
he's also doing yeah, Bjornson is also doing that. And it's very much in tune with the other works we've read so far in these early years of the Nobel Prize. It's dreadfully hard to read. But again, I think a lot of the hardness of the read
I think it's a
is
translation.
the translation. Yeah.
I have a feeling if you got a good this is a challenge for someone out there who speaks this language. I have a strong feeling that if you got a good translation of this, it could be actually pretty darn good. I think it could be a pretty good poem. I think you could read this with a great deal of interest. I think there's a huge problem with this translation. It's bad. It's hard. And I blame the translation because that was why I asked at the beginning, is this in rhyming couplets in French? And the fact that it actually has a fairly complicated rhyme scheme and it has a fairly complicated meter and all these other problems. I think that's the technical the woman who translated this wanted to meet a technical challenge and lost the forest for
Hmm.
these, for A B B C C.
Hmm. Yeah. I would say don't go with the rhyme,
Yeah, no,
right?
abandon the rhyme. Abandon the
Just
rhyme. Yeah.
abandon the rhyme. I would even say I think a
You can keep a
prose.
meter. I think if you kept a meter, no, I don't like pro. I mean, I think you gotta have, it's poetry. You have to, it's formal poetry. Like it's formal poetry in French. You gotta have formal poetry in the translation. So
I
if
don't
you
know.
did it in iambics, if she did
Hmm.
it in blank verse iambics, I'd say it's fine.
Hmm.
Similar to say, doing a translation of Dante. I've only read one translation that, in Dante, Dante has like really cool rhyme scheme. He has the tritharema, which
Hmm.
is the A B A B C B C D C D E D E F F E F E. So and it's really cool. I read one translation where a translator does attempt that. He only did it for Inferno. And what's cool about it is how every line, every sort of three lines locks with the next three lines. It has this sort of motor that really drives it that gets lost in most English translations. But if you read that translation, again, the guy has to jump through enormous hoops to get the rhymes to work in English, which you don't have to do in Italian. The guy has to work really, really hard. John Chiara does a good translation of it, and I think he does ABACDCEFE. So he just does every other line. He doesn't bother trying to lock them, but he does that. And again, I think that's a good middle ground. He sort of gets enough of the rhyme without trying to really get the rhyme. But there's other good translations which are just in iambics or blank verse, and I think they work fine. I think if you're gonna do this, if you really want to do it in iambics, maybe do, every other line, do similar kind of thing where you're doing like A, B, A, C, D, C, something like that. But the interlocking, trying to do the rhyming couplets is bad. Doesn't work.
Yeah, I wonder if you could just do the AAB CC or whatever. Maybe it just is too hard in this language.
I
Um,
think English is I
English
don't
is
know I don't know
unusually hard to rhyme.
why English. I mean, English is a bad language for rhyming. I don't know why we want to do rhyming in this language. It's a bad language for rhyming. If we wanted iambics, we do well with iambics, and we do really well. I mean, this is going back to Anglo-Saxon verse. We do really well
With
with
alliteration.
with alliterative verse. English really should be all English poetry. I think all should be alliterative because this is what our language wants to do. Our language does not want to rhyme. It's not a good rhyming language. So if you want to write a poem in rhyming, fine. But if you want to translate a poem from another language that rhymes and follow the same rhyme scheme, it's nearly impossible to do it well.
This would actually be interesting as a kind of an alliterative thing, with
Yeah.
a sort of hard stop in the middle. Like
Oh
you'd have
yeah,
to
if you're doing the
observe.
caesura, if you're doing the caesuras, yeah, in the middle, and you could again, somebody who's a really good poet who could take this thing and do that kind of translation of it and make a really good English poem, turn it into a sort of Anglo-Saxony style thing. I mean, this poem is intentionally reaching back to an archaic age in the French construction.
That would
Do
be
it
perfect. Yeah.
treat it that way in English. You don't try to take what it is, and our language has its own archaic tradition. Follow our own archaic tradition in our language with a poem that's intentionally archaic in another language. That's a better conception for translation than
Yeah, I think
this.
of it. You ever read The Seafarer? It's an Anglo-Saxon poem that it's about a
Is
person
that
kind
the
of,
one who sees Jesus on the boat or something?
yeah, he's kind of lost at sea
Yeah,
and kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
given up everything.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that kind of, that sort of feel and that meter would, I don't know, that would be a good model for moving this into.
Yeah, you could
Um,
do it. But it would
yeah,
it would
absolutely.
take a really good translation, and I think if you had a really good poet, and I think if you had it, this could be really interesting. There's some really interesting stuff buried under a very bad translation. This is the kind of poem that you gotta go to the terrible restaurants to appreciate the good ones. This is the one that reminds you of why translations are really hard in
No
poetry and what
problem.
a bad translation does to a poem.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is, I agree with that. Do you want to move into
Let's go to the movie.
the opera? Did you watch the
Yeah,
opera or
I
the?
did. I watched the opera.
Oh,
No, I
okay,
watched
good.
the opera. I
Well,
watched
there's
the
some
opera.
movies of it. I just
Oh no, I
couldn't
watched the
find
opera.
them. Yeah, I was gonna say, where did you find it? I tried. So here's the opera, Muriel, written in 1864. So very shortly after this was published, it was an opera by 1864. Charles Gounod, who was pretty famous at the time for his version of Faust, his opera Faust, with a French, not octon, but French libretto by Michel Carré. Actually, apparently, its original audience had Turgenev in it. So, who wrote a letter about how bad it was to a friend of his. And it premiered in Paris, which apparently was the wrong place for it, and didn't do very well. It moved to Marseille in the south of France, at which point it was changed from a 5 to 3 act structure. The sad ending was changed to a happy ending. Apparently, she remembered her hat this time. But even despite that, it also failed. There was a 4 act version, because if it's not 3 or 5, maybe 4 would do it. That premiered in 1874. Not successful, but another alternative 3 act version found some success in 1889. Henri Bousser in 1934 restored the 5 acts, really looked at Gounod's original intentions through that composer's material, and tried to make it as loyal as he could, which is sort of the version we saw. He put it on, it was successful, and there you go. That became a kind of not really part of the classical opera canon, but it it comes up in comic opera for now and then. The opera itself tries this kind of middle ground between standard romantic stuff and folk music. There's a few folk songs that are actually built into the opera from Provence. There's one called Margarito. I'm not going to say the rest of the names of them, but there's at least two folk songs that are kind of built in. Reminds me a little bit of the Russian Five, if you know those composers, like Rimsky-Korsakov, who used to use Russian folk music in their compositions. They used classical compositions. They tried to get Tchaikovsky to do it, but he stopped after his first symphony. But anyway, so this opera uses alternative meters in order to get the impression of folk music. Folk music tends to use non-standard alternative meters, and so does this opera. However, when looking at the history of this, especially the move in the mid 19th century from Paris to Marseille, and why it was such a failure in the South, there's a really interesting article by Catherine Ellis, which I would have shared with you, Pat, but I just saw it before we went on today, from 2012, which shows a lot of reviews at that time and how a lot of reviewers felt that the opera was basically a classical French language Parisian opera that had a few gestures towards the region, and that it wasn't in fact regional at all, that it was a very much a Parisian thing, and its various failures were that it was sort of aping provincial interest or kind of lower income people interest. And
So it's like the Rent of its day.
yeah,
Yeah, it
kind
just kind
of.
of
It's
has
one of
this
those things of like, let's celebrate. Like Oklahoma, kind of. Oklahoma was successful.
That's probably that's a better
Yeah,
example. Yeah.
that's what I thought of when I read this. I
So
mean,
is Rent. Rent is very successful too. But I feel like those are both these just sort of like, I mean, let's have these sort of stereotypes of poor people either in a city or a country.
yeah, I
Um,
think it's just also it's like Parisians writing about the south of France. I think is like people in New York writing about the Midwest. Yeah.
I agree. Oklahoma's a better example. Yeah, it's a better example. Oklahoma's a better example. Yeah, yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I think that seems to be the kind of the failure of it. I will say when watching it, there is not a lot of distinct melody, but there's a
A
few
lot of
good
opera
things.
doesn't have that
Yeah.
though. Like a lot of opera doesn't have
Mhm.
melody.
Mhm. But there's a few good moments in it. I think a few good arias. I think the duet between
Yeah.
Muriel and Vincent is very strong. I think her end of I think it's Act Three, where she's going off to find him, I think works really well.
Is that the one where she just like falls? Like literally, I'm like, did she die? What are they
Yeah.
doing? She just lies on the ground for like 30 seconds? I'm like, I don't know, speak French, so I don't know if she's dead. They clearly changed a lot of this. I don't know if she's dead or what they're doing. And then she just kind of like picks her head back up again, starts singing. I'm like, "Well, she's not dead. I don't really know.
Oh,
Is that
quite dead. Yeah.
not quite dead yet, but I don't know if that is it that sequence.
I think it's a little earlier. It's before she goes off looking for him in the desert.
Again I was losing a little bit because I don't speak French. I thought it was before. Maybe it was when she was in the desert. Maybe I just lost track of it.
In
Anyway.
the desert, she also has a kind of aria thing where she collapses.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
that's
I
probably the
wasn't.
one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I also liked the villain and the
He was good.
chorus singing that scene with the bridge. You don't see him
Hmm.
on the boat, but they kind of exemplify what you're talking about, the fairy spirits that are torturing him by having a kind of male chorus off stage singing to him.
I have a feeling that should, and I get it. This seems like a relatively regional opera production. And there's no scenery. There's literally none. They have projections on the screen. So they just have a projection on the background, which fine, I get it. You're dealing with probably relative budget constraints. I have a feeling if you did that in a real opera house, that scene could be awesome. Like that scene could be so creepy that it reminds me of I think I've seen a video of a production of Orfeo, like the original um whatever is green, the green
Monteverdi.
Monteverde. I'm like the green, the green
The
word for
Green
green,
Mountain.
the Green Mountain. Yeah,
Green
like the
Mountain
Green
Man.
Mountain guy. I
I'm like,
was like,
the coffee?
I know it's Monta, and I know it's green, but I get yeah, Monteverde. Um, so in Monteverde's Orfeo, which I think is like the first real opera that's still performed today, they have a great sequence with, and I've seen videos of it, of when Orfeo is trying to wow Charon. And it's just like, and it's like, it's a true like major production. It might be the New York, it might be the New York Opera Company, Carnegie Hall or whatever. Um, and it's really creepy of just this like giant Charon, sort of, standing by the river in this really deep bass and Orfeo singing to him. And it's creepy. It's a really cool sequence with costumes and all this kind of stuff. I imagine that sequence of crossing the river, if you had a really, really good opera company doing it, could be really cool. You could make some really cool stuff with that, a really cool design around it. So it's effective in its simplicity, in its Brechtian nature. Uh, I'll pronounce it correctly. In its Brechtian nature, it has a Brechtian feel to it. In the sort of projections and no props, no sets. It's just they just get up there and sing. And so it's cool in its simplicity. But I imagine if you blew that up and had a really cool company, that scene could be particularly good.
Yeah, in the original libretto, they did have this tableau conceit. So it seems like in the new scenes they would have a tableau come up, which I guess in the modern version is they just use a projection. But regardless, it doesn't really matter, right? You could make the, if you just ignore that and stage it all in all,
Yeah,
it could be really cool. And I'd say it moves.
it's still good. Yeah,
It's still good. I like the use of chorus. The chorus moments are very interesting. I'd say this production, the actors probably didn't realize the camera was going to be on them because a lot of the chorus
no.
actors are kind of checked out when they're not singing, sometimes even when they are singing. But that's fine.
But
That's
again, I'm guessing this is a relatively regional production. Like,
mhm.
I don't think it's the traveling New York Philharmonic or
No, no,
whatever.
no.
I
Um,
don't think that's what this is. So it's probably it feels like relative. They're
mhm.
high quality singers, but I think it's still a local production based
Yeah,
on production values.
yeah,
So
and
yeah, some of the members of the chorus are probably just the local choir that was pulled
mhm.
into this.
Yeah, they're singers. They're not really performing. But you're right. I think there's a lot of opportunity for really, really cool staging. And it would probably actually be a lot of opportunity, though we didn't watch any of the films. There's three of them. I honestly, I could not find them. I couldn't find them on Amazon. I couldn't find them for sale. I couldn't find them illegally. I mean, legally. I couldn't find them anywhere. But there seems to be just a lot of cool kind of opportunities for just compositions, stage
Yeah.
compositions. I think the stuff with the villain could be potentially really cool. They cut out a lot of the witch stuff.
Which was really disappointing. They made
Really
the
disappointing. Yeah.
witch. And again, you could make a great sequence of her sort of going into this underworld with this witch. That's a great opportunity for just really dazzling singing and stagecraft. You can make a really interesting thing out of this, but they just don't. The witch just kind of, I didn't even realize it was the witch for a little while. The witch is like in the very, very beginning, and she seems to be like friends with Mirio. Is it Mirio? Are we going with Mirio?
In this, it's Miriel, I
Miriel, whatever it
think,
is. She seems to be
and
she
Mirio
seems
in
to be
the Provence.
friends with her, right? She's like talking to her, and they have a duet where she seems to be like telling her all the problems like that are going to happen. Again, I don't speak French, so it's a little hard to tell. So you kind of, I think I can pick up a few words based on Latin. So you're kind of trying to, but she seems to be friends with her, and she's telling her about problems and difficulties that are going to come up. But I'm like, why is she doing this? And again, it was sort of like they seem to have recognized that there was a really cool character, and they were like, we got to get this person more stage time. And then they just like, we don't really know what to do with her. So she's going to be
Yeah,
almost like the nurse in Romeo and
kind
Juliet.
of.
She sort of has this serious nurse quality.
She is a little earlier in the poem, so she comes in Canto 6. So the 12 cantos, it's the halfway point. And that's when you get the cool stuff,
Yeah.
right? With the fairies that are underground and they do all these things. So there was one fairy that went into a lot of detail who cooks your meals for you and then cleans your home. I'm like, this is just a Yelp review at this point. But anyway, you get her a little earlier
Oh, did
on.
they? Oh, I missed that then.
Caver, I think her name
Oh,
is,
I missed that she
and
was there earlier on. I totally
a
missed it then.
little bit, yeah. I think it's Canto one or
Oh, then I
two,
missed that. Fine. Okay, fine.
but that's fine. But she's sort of mentioned as kind of a witch, but you think she's not actually a
She's not
witch. They're just
actually,
kind
but
of
she's
dismissing
yeah.
her. And it seems like this opera has decided she's not actually a witch, they're just dismissing her. Like she's sort of the
Yeah.
outcast. And she is giving the our main female lead, Muriel, some advice on how to deal with love, basically. She sort of, I don't guess, portends that Vincent is coming along. Well, Muriel is actually on the market, so to speak, right? She's almost 15, time to get married, as we all know we do. And I guess she's giving her advice early on in order to deal with this, and then comes out later. But she isn't really, there's no evidence she's an actual witch. I don't think there's even anything in the libretto that indicates
Again, I don't.
she's a
Yeah, I couldn't
witch.
tell. I thought she still was, but again, going off of this, the action and the language and guesses at it. I thought the only reason was because I didn't quite understand what happened with Vincent after he was stabbed with the trident. Because she finds him in the woods, and again, I thought she did sort of do magic to heal him, but it's very possible I just didn't understand what was
Yeah,
happening.
I mean, she seems to heal him. I don't know if it was magic from the libretto. I was reading along with it, and I get the impression that it was somewhat suggested she heals
Okay,
him.
yeah, I mean
We're
you
not
could totally
quite
be
sure
right. Yeah,
why.
you could
Yeah,
totally be
yeah,
right. I wasn't sure because I can only
yeah,
go off of gesture and
yeah,
cognates.
yeah. Um, but that's really disappointing that they kind of cut that character down. They cut that character down in an attempt to give her more stage
Yeah,
time, and yet I don't think it kind of flopped.
I think they just wanted to
Uh,
give like Muriel like the girlfriend to chat with,
talk to.
the Ismene to her Antigone kind of thing.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
think they were trying to do that, and it was just like, well, you could have done it with a less interesting character because you basically just made her
well,
uninteresting.
they
And
do it also with Vincent's sister as well.
oh, I missed that.
Yeah, Vincent's sister is Vincenta.
Oh,
Um, apparently,
that's the George. That's like the George Foreman thing of just George and Georginas. You just got
yeah,
Vincent and Vincenta.
yeah, that was her name. Vincenta was also a cognate of yeah, Vincenta. I'm right. And she is sort of a kind of a bestie of the main character as well. She also, I think, gets the last independent singing bit during that chorus at the end. She sort of announces the moral at the very end. So I guess she could have taken
So she
on
could have
that
taken
role a
on that
little
role.
more.
If you were gonna rewrite the thing
Yeah.
anyway, just give her that role, and then give the witch something really interesting to do.
Yeah. And you could tease her. You don't need to just drop her in the middle of
Yeah,
it.
she can float around like, she can float around like the soothsayer in
Yeah.
Julius Caesar. You can have her still in the background.
Yeah, or you could just hint at like, oh, there's something out there that isn't good.
Yeah.
And then ironic realization is she actually helps them when nobody else will.
Yeah, I thought what I thought they were gonna do with it, and I thought, again, I knew that this opera wasn't gonna be able to do it, but I'm not a big opera. I don't know much about opera, but I do have some operas that I really like, and the one I really like is the German, The Marksman. That's the one with like the Wolf's Glen scene. I don't know. Do you know the Marksman, the German, the Marksman?
I haven't seen it, but I know
Yeah,
of it.
I've just watched the videos on YouTube of it. When you see a really good production of it, of the Wolf's Glen, it's so cool. So in the Marksman, it's this he's a marksman, he's a shooter, and he needs to win a shooting contest in order to win the woman that he loves. So this guy comes to him and says, I can help you. I know someone in the woods who can help you. Samil, my friend Samil can help you. And so they go to the Wolf's Glen like at midnight, and it's so cool, and it's clearly just this like glen in the middle of the woods, and there's wolves everywhere and animals, and they when you get a really good opera company, they really make it look really cool. And they call on Samil, who's this sort of demon figure who he sells him these sort of magic bullets that he can use to win the thing. Of course, they're nothing good's gonna come from these bullets. But it's just this. I thought they were gonna. Oh, they're gonna have this awesome sequence where she's gonna go to the witch, and they're gonna go down into this sort of Wolf's Glen-esque, romantic, cool cave thing with fairies everywhere. I thought, oh, that sequence is gonna be the really cool sequence in this thing, and they didn't do it. Like, why? Why would you avoid? Why would you not do that?
Mhm. Yeah, I don't. And you get her. They sort of hinted her because in one of the projections, she's in the projection. She was talking, in the next projection, she is sort of melted into the screen. And I thought, oh, that's kind of a
That's a
cool.
cool
If you have
idea.
limited buckshot, that's a cool effect. She's gonna come back and be creepy, right? There's something creepy about this person,
There's
but
something
no,
creepy about a
no, there's
person
a
who goes into a projection screen. It's sort
yeah.
of that Samara. Is it Samara?
Mhm.
Samara? The one from the ring?
Oh yeah, Samara.
Samara.
Yeah, yeah. I
Like
know what you're talking
it's
about.
that kind of
Mm.
quality. And I thought, yeah, that's the witch we want. Like this is cool. She's like melting into the projections. We're gonna get something good. And they didn't do it. Like, it was just even the low budget production couldn't come up with something interesting to do with it. They did. They came up with something interesting, but they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know how to further it.
Yeah, and granted, the
It's
libretto
not there.
doesn't
Yeah, it's not there.
do anything. Yeah, so what are you gonna do? Um, yeah, my favorite incoherent witch moment ever was a recent, maybe, oh God, it's about 10 years ago, production of The Crucible, where you see the people accused of witchcraft flying at one point, and they're alone. You're like, so they are
So they were
witches.
communists.
Yes, so they.
So they were.
This is a complete justification.
McCarthy was right. That's really
Ah,
good. I didn't see that.
yeah.
You missed the point.
What is going on?
That's
Ah,
really good.
s- yeah. So I say, um, I thought this was interesting for a lot of reasons we talked about, which is this sort of idea of the nation and the canon as changing its position from being something that I suppose the first canons would be biblical or religious.
Yeah.
This is a collection of things that tell us
Or
something.
classical.
And then it goes like classical, right? Which I think is part of sort of an education model.
Well, Western
Um,
Christian, I mean, Western civilization is based on that model. It's based on a model. It's based on a blending of Christianity and classical literature. That is Western culture
yeah.
in a nutshell.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And you have the Christian canon, or I guess even before that, the Hebrew canon, which is very strict because it's the word of God. The same thing with the Christian canon, which becomes more complicated when you have Protestant sects emerge. The classical
Well,
canon
the
is a
Christian
little.
canon does expand quite a bit. I don't know enough about Hebrew texts to know, but the Christian canon does expand quite a bit. With You get like Saint Augustine, you get patristic writers, and
Hmm.
you end up with sort of levels of authority of
Yeah, I
cultural
think it's a good way to
authority.
put it. There's different, well, those are different canons then. And then the classical
Yeah.
canon, I think, is some other kind of level of authority, right? Because it's a difference between this is what officially counts and this is kind of what tends to count, kind of what tends to be repeated for reasons that are more traditional as opposed to enforced. Um, I think that's true of the classical canon, and true of the, I guess, what you call commentary texts
Yeah.
in the Christian tradition. Um, and then you come to the 19th century, and there's a few interesting things that I think are intersecting with what ends up being part of this early project of the Nobel Prizes, which is what does a canon mean in a post-Enlightenment age?
You think it's a post-Enlightenment age?
Well, maybe not. Is the nation a post-Enlightenment or Enlightenment project?
I would say it's an enlightened. Well, is it? Well, maybe it's romantic.
It's a
It's a
romantic, I
romantic,
would say
yeah.
a
No, no,
romantic
you're right. It's a
notion.
romantic. It's
Yeah.
romantic. But yes, okay, fine. It's romantic. This whole concept, yeah, language and nation is romantic. Yes, I would agree. Okay,
Hmm.
fine.
And I think, yeah, the canon then becomes for the first time this kind of, national or romantic project that changes everything, right? I
Hmm.
don't know if there's a major transformation of an idea of a canon before that. I think you have the authority of religion, the authority of culture, and education is delving into that in some way.
Yeah, well, you still have there's an authority of culture. There's authority of those there's an authority. There is still an authority of individuals. In an Enlightenment project. That's there is still in America, it becomes the founding fathers. They have authority. They're vested with it. There is an authority that does sort of get vested in those types of things, but no one's establishing saying like these are the great works of our nation.
Yeah, I would agree. At least not in a, at least it's not in a hierarchy sort of way. I mean, the universities aren't selling that kind of stuff.
It's not an academic pursuit. There is
No, it's not
still
an academic. So you're not reading Jefferson. If you're reading anything, you're reading Cicero.
Yeah, there is a popular movement. There's a popular movement in a number of ways. I remember writing a paper once about theater in just post independence, like 1790s theater, and there was a major movement to not do British plays because it was like we're going to do our own plays, and they wrote these truly awful, awful plays. A lot of them are like the life of George Washington, the life of George Love. They're awful, awful plays, but they were trying to sort of forge an identity through literature, and even something like the fact that whenever everyone who's ever had to sit through their American lit class in high school learned about, okay, half of our class is going to be the transcendentalists because it's like the only thing we got. We got baseball, we got jazz, and we have, for what they're worth, the transcendentalists. Nobody else did this, and so we end up with that. But it was an attempt, but it was a popular attempt. To your point, nobody is really doing this, and so someone like Melville gets lost because it wasn't popular until academics really start looking at him in, say, 1920s, I think is when people really start looking at Melville, and then suddenly academics realize, like, oh man, this guy was good, and he suddenly resurges. So I think that yes, there is a popular movement that tends to create a that wants to create a canon as part of national identity in the 19th century, but it's not an academic movement. That's part of academic movements are still stuck in Enlightenment. Popular movements are moving towards Romanticism.
Yeah, or even stuck earlier. I would say academic movements are stuck in, when it comes to the humanities,
Okay,
they're
yeah, yeah.
stuck in classics. I think they are in purely Enlightenment in terms of the
They're stuck in
sciences.
humanist. They're stuck in humanism. Like they're stuck back
Yeah,
in, yeah.
but they're human. Yeah, they're
Yeah, but
humanists. They
that's what I'm
should
saying.
be
They're humanists. Like
there.
literally in the 13th, 14th century, sense of the word. They're humanists in a
Mhm.
very old sense.
But they're Enlightenment in terms of the sciences. And I think what ends up happening
How
with,
much science is taught in universities at that time?
oh, I think a
Other than like
deal of it.
Cambridge, other than like Oxford isn't doing. Are they doing much
They're not
science?
doing. I thought so. I thought you start to see kind of science
Okay, it
instruction
could be. I don't know.
early on, but I don't think it's as formal. Um, but I,
I didn't know if this was still the days of like, you know, Herbert Spencer discovered helium in his basement type of thing.
yeah,
Like
yeah. I guess it is. It's a mixture of those things. I'm sure the
Herbert
universities
Spencer's a
are
real
the.
person, so I shouldn't. I was trying to think of a better name, but Herbert Spencer's the one that popped into my head, so I shouldn't use him as
Yeah,
an example. But
it's odd. There's a book I'm re. Oh, Kim.
oh yeah, I
I
love
just
Kim.
finished
I love
Kim.
Kim.
Kim references Herbert
Yeah,
Spencer a ton of
yeah.
times as a joke. So I'm like, why was I just reading about Herbert Spencer?
He's
Oh,
not,
that's right.
no,
It's in
no, it's
Kim.
not a he's not a household name. That's
No,
probably why I
I've
said it.
actually
It's,
read Herbert Spencer. I've read Social
yeah,
Statistics about 10 years
but
ago.
that's
Um,
clearly yeah. But anyway. Kim's another day.
yeah, regardless. But so it seems to be part of it is, I guess the humanities are just behind because what ends up happening to a certain degree is this idea of reading a book and analyzing it is something they take from the sciences, and so it comes a little later. It's sort of an enlightenment project, but it's late to the game because humanities in the 19th century, once you start using modern languages, and I think this is where the canon changes, that intersects with this kind of national romantic chest pounding, is at first it's philology. It's the study of the origin of languages, which the Germans had the jump on, right? Like the Grimm's brothers.
Yeah.
The Grimm's brothers are more famous probably for their fairy tales, but their real
They
advancement
were
is,
they were trying to do this because they were trying to find common roots in language.
yeah, and they do. I mean, the Grimm's law is still it's still a functional
Is
law
that the
in
consonant
linguistics.
one that like G's
It's
become
a consonant
K's or
one.
whatever it is? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and P's become
Yeah,
F's
yeah.
is another one. Yeah, um, but and
Good
so that's
Lord, there's
where
like some information that just gets that's stored somewhere in here. Uh,
yeah, D's become T's. That's another
yeah, I
one,
mean,
or
I'm glad I remember
TH's.
that. God knows when I ever read that one, but yeah, I know, I remember that. I remember reading that. Yeah, they that was their thing. They were philologists, and yeah, that they
Yeah,
certain of their philology is fascinating in the sense that it's one of these weird things that you think that language is not subject to many evolutionary laws. Like you think like, they go in random
it's
directions
entirely
all over the
subject to
place.
evolutionary laws.
It's really weird how much language is just follows very set patterns. So much so that they can like recreate old languages. Just knowing how we pronounce something and be like, well, we know how it's pronounced now. We know how it's pronounced in 1300, so we can pretty much figure out how it was pronounced in the 5th century BC. Like, that's wacky and really, really
You,
accurate. Philology's cool.
yeah, and not only that, you can learn Proto-Indo-European.
Yeah.
You can learn to speak Proto-Indo-European. That's a language they spoke probably 50,000 years ago when living in the Black Sea. Not in, on the Black Sea. Um, that's it's incredible. But anyway, that's when it started, and that kind of brought German as a thing you should actually study into the kind of universities. And eventually there was a push. It's really interesting. There was a member of the Adams family, Charles Francis Adams, his great grandfather, I think was John, the president, and he wrote an address when visiting Harvard in the 1870s. He graduated there. He was visiting the Phi Beta Kappa Club, and he wrote a speech basically about how stupid it is to learn Greek and Latin. We need to learn more useful things like the modern languages. And in response to this guy was apparently so popular. In response to this, a bunch of professors in 1883 met and formed the MLA. They
Mm.
formed the Modern Language Association in Columbia College, as it was called at the time, to start pushing this stuff in.
I mean, I'm
It
glad they did. I wish they had not thrown the baby out with the bathwater, but
Well, classics is still there. It's just not nearly as popular.
yeah, I just
Probably because
think
it's
it's
harder.
yeah, I think there would be value. I mean, this is I always say I wish I'd done like the St. John's thing, that's just go and you kind of get the good with the bad. Um, I just think there's some value in going back to learning those languages and learning that kind of stuff and having a group that knows them well, having like a solid class that is familiar with a similar set of values. And, we can still do Dostoevsky. We can still do this stuff. But that there's some value in that too. But that all got tossed out. Nowadays, it's like, just make it all up and pick your stuff as you go. And as long as you take 10 classes in the same area, you're done.
Well, I think Adams won. I think
Yeah,
Charles
no, I
Francis
agree.
Adams
That's what I'm
won.
saying.
His argument is,
I
yeah.
wish I'm not disagreeing with him. I just wish they hadn't thrown the baby out with the bathwater.
Oh no, I disagree with him. I,
I
I
wish,
think
well, what
those
I wish they had
his
done.
argument is entirely utilitarian. He's like, we should learn French and German because it's more useful because people actually speak them, and we need to speak
But
them.
I think it's not worth ignoring those things.
No,
what I think it should have been is instead of being like, well, in a college major, let's say you take 32 between 32 and 40 classes, if you're taking 32 classes, well, then now it's like, well, 22 of them can be in whatever you want, and only 10 of them need to be in a common area. It should be the reverse. It's like, no, 22 of your classes are prescribed. You must take these classes. And not even like you get to choose them. Like they're required, these ones, and then pick 10 others. that can come from the languages, the sciences, whatever, whatever you want. Pick the rest of them from something else. But it's the opposite of what it is right now. Your core is core. Everyone has it all across all universities, across all these things, so that there is a common ground and everybody kind of knows and is familiar with common concepts. And but you still get to go, and if you want to go do Faust, if you want to do Goethe, go do Goethe. There's not in a utilitarian sense, but just in a sense of building a better individual. You should know things outside of the classics and sort of these, these sort of essentially, the as I would say, like the great books kind of thing. Go pick from there, but there should be a core, and the core should be very large.
Yeah, I agree. I think a larger core, a more inclusive one is probably the point. It seems to be, I've seen defenses of the canon that it still is its main point nowadays, kind of post-romantic, is unity, is the kind of sense of unity, which is sort of the point of the old canon. It's unity through maybe more firm authority.
But it doesn't, this is just it's not a utilitarian sense. It's this is the what this is a what makes a good person. What makes a good, how does one live a good, it's a teleological nature of education. I'm a believer in teleological nature of education, that education should lead you to not to understand, but to question how to be a good person. Literally, not just how to behave well, but as in good, as in I have a good chair and I have a good cat and I have a good car. How do you be a good person? What does that mean? And question it and work with other individuals to understand it. And I think that's the real purpose of education. And if everybody's having different conversations and everybody's all over the place, it's really hard to do that. And so saying we should study the vernacular and we should move away from classics isn't a bad thing. Saying that we should be more inclusive, it's not just about Greco-Roman and Judeo-Christian values, is fine. We should do that. We should incorporate more, but it shouldn't be a la carte. We shouldn't be able to return from the buffet to our table and one of us has picked a totally different cuisine than the other one.
Yes, and this is interesting at this point because it does seem like what we're seeing right now in this, historically speaking, not right now in 2025, but at this point in the 20th century and in the 19th century, if we go back to when this author was awarded the Nobel Prize and when this work was written, it's the first time people are going, all right, let's expand this thing to include, I guess what you think of as plebeian speak,
Yeah,
right? As kind of
literally the vulgar,
the vulgar
vulgar. It
language.
was. I mean, we tend to say if somebody say it's vulgar, it's bad. No, vulgar just means of the people.
Hmm.
That's why the Jerome wrote the Vulgate, the translation into Latin of the people. He wrote the Vulgate. That's the of the people. So yeah, we're going to the vulgar language. We are going to respect the language of the people. That's not a bad thing. It doesn't need to be utilitarian, but it's not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. And it's interesting, I think, in these first steps to see how it goes,
Yeah.
right? Because I think in these first steps, you see canon making with the Nobel Prize Committee, and it seems to be not just we need to go back to the people, but like the people are these kind of earthy farmer people. And so this,
There's just so many farmers.
yeah,
As we're reading more, and I'm trying to read ahead of some of them. I'm like New Thompson and all these guys. I'm like, good Lord, why did they like farmers so
yeah,
much? I get it after World War One. I think there was a like, man, industrialization isn't good, but why are they still obsessed with farmers beforehand?
yeah. They seem to celebrate, yeah, whatever. But that's what I think is interesting here is that there's an expansion of the canon, a recognition of a new thing the canon can be doing, which can be this sort of national identity, but also we're dealing with a book a poem that's regional, right? It's actually kind of anti-national in a certain sense to speak
Well, it's
in,
a different nation, yeah.
no, or it's a different nation. Do you consider regionalism an interior nationalism, or is it?
Well,
something
this is
else.
Woodrow Wilson's problem, but
Yeah, I mean,
this is
um,
where does the nation end, and then you end up with,
mm.
Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, and just this like, you guys seem similar. Well, you guys go together,
Mhm.
but
Yeah, but it seems like language or inventing a vulgate. I guess we're
yeah,
not inventing it, but recognizing
that's
it
the main definition.
makes the kind of unity, right?
Yeah,
That's going to be the borders of a people, is the things they read together. The
yeah,
songs they sing. When we come together and sing songs, if you can sing the same songs as me, um, there we go.
and
We
there we go.
are we are we are of a people together. And that seems to be the identification at this point of a canon. And it would be interesting to see how this blows up because I do not think that is what stays in place through the 20th
No,
century.
no, it's not
I
what
think,
happens. So
yeah,
I think we'll get into that a bit more as we go along. But
yeah,
yes, it is what it is right now.
yeah, right. So, any other comments on this? Canons? The Adams family?
So we have to do our is this part of the canon?
Oh, yes. Is this part of the canon? What do you think, Pat? Is it
No,
definitely yes or probably yes? No,
no,
no, no. Why is that?
it's intolerable. It
Hmm.
is intolerable.
Hmm.
No, I mean it's not as far as, I mean, it depends again on how we're defining canon. Western canon, very much unlikely. Others have done this type of thing better, is kind of the problem. But it certainly has its own regional strength, and I think you could make this into a very good translation, but others have done it better, and there's other things worth reading.
Yeah, it's going to be a no for me as well. I don't think it's just not pleasurable.
No,
The work should be
it's
pleasurable,
intolerable.
and it doesn't inspire enough interesting conversation to justify its difficulty. Um, it all of the conversation was about the fact of when it was written, not about the thing itself, for the most part.
For the most part, except for like one chapter,
Yeah,
one or two chapters, which were interesting. But
yeah. So I think it's a no for me as well, though I appreciate why it was brought
I
forward.
appreciate what it is, and I appreciate why it was brought forward. I appreciate what it is as a piece of history. Really interesting. I don't want to do that again, though.
Okay. Oh, so audience, that's a no for our canonical book here. It's a non-canonical book now. Um, but that's it. Yeah. Any other thoughts on Mirie?
I'm looking forward to going to Quo Vadis, which is like a legit book and a legit movie.
Things to talk about. Yeah.
There is like, this will be our first one that's like a book that I think stands on its own, that we would still be reading even if he didn't win the Nobel Prize,
It's to be
and
celebrated. Yeah.
is a movie that's like, the others were kind of just, no one would be watching these things if they weren't based on Nobel Prize winning books. I think people would still watch Quo Vadis. It's not my favorite movie, but I think people would still watch it, and I think people would still read this book. Looking forward to getting to
I'm looking forward to that as well. If you enjoyed Mirio, you might enjoy the 1934 film directed by René Gaveau, the silent film from 1909 titled Murel's Sincere Love, starring silent film legend Roger Carl. You know Roger Carl, right,
If you
Pat?
can find any of these movies, let us know. I would be
Yeah,
fascinated to
please.
see
I
them.
tried. But there's also a 1922 film version just called Murel, and that is out there as well. You can rate and review this show anywhere fine podcasts are available. For those viewing in YouTube land, if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the Talking Studios channel for all our exciting content, and follow us on social media at Talking Studios. Check out other shows by Talking Studios, including Talking Pictures Trivia, where we explore movies through trivia, Keep Making Movies, where we explore micro-budget films, Limited Lexicon, where we play through text-based adventure games, and Get the Point, where we slowly reveal a movie poster and try to guess which movie poster it is. Got a question for us? Call the Talking Studios hotline at 201-467 8679 and leave a message. It may be featured on a future episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Adapt It, wherever fine podcasts are found. Join us next week when we discuss the 1905 Nobel Prize winner Heinrich Sienkiewicz and his book, Quo Vadis. See you then.
Wow, Talking Studios.
Next week, we'll be discussing the 1905 prize winner Heinrich Sienkiewicz and his book, Quo Vadis. Pat, who would you have direct this film if you could pick anyone?
I would have Martin Scorsese do it.
Oh, okay. Why is that? That's interesting.
I think I would have Scorsese do it because he kind of did this movie to some extent. It's a much less epic version of it, but he did what I'm assuming has to be taking at least some of the characters from the novel, particularly. He did the movie Silence by Shusaku Endo, and that strikes me as having a lot in common. I don't know if you saw that. I haven't seen the movie, but I've read the book, and the book has a lot in common with this. And I suspect at least pieces of it are lifted or sort of altered from Quo Vadis. I'm not going to do Quo Vadis the whole time, but it's supposed to be Quo Vadis and Venetius, but we won't be pedantic. But so in Quo Vadis, and so I think he could actually be kind of interesting. Like I think he actually does, from what I understand in the movie Silence, he actually does kind of deal with some of the themes somewhat ham-fisted. But and I think Shusaku Endo also deals with some of the themes a bit ham-fisted. But I think it could be an interesting option here. So I'm gonna go with Martin Scorsese because I think he could actually handle a little bit of the subtlety in the book and translate it into the film. I'm going with that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I have not seen Silence or read it. I have not heard encouraging.
Book is fairly decent. I don't know if the movie's any good.
Yeah, I've not heard encouraging things about the book. About the movie. However, if you've seen Kundun, the Martin Scorsese movie about the last Dalai Lama from Tibet.
Oh yeah, that's a good, yeah,
really good movie.
That's
that
a great
with,
movie. That's
yeah.
an epic film too. That's a good one.
It's an epic film, but it's never that sort of Ben-Hur type epic.
No, it's an epic film on a local scale, like sort of idea.
It's looking at the transformations of a country and of a kind of a religion through the eyes of a single individual. So it does, I think it's a good way to put it. It localizes the epic. Yeah. For me, I guess we're gonna do Ridley Scott because I didn't think of a better one.
When my head hurts, went, I could do Ridley Scott, but it's just the Gladiator thing.
Yeah,
because again, I'm like, no, Gladiator clearly stole a lot from this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could do Wolfgang Peterson, the guy who directed Troy, but that movie was worse than Gladiator.
Yeah,
it was an absolute damn train wreck.
That was the one, I think, where there was some professors from our college, from the classics department at our college, who were advisors on that, and they demanded that their names be taken out
Troy
of the credits.
Is awful. Yeah, it's awful.
They were told that they could not show their faces in the department if their names were. That's what my understanding was. That they demanded their names be taken off, and so they are not credited in it because they said they just destroyed it.
Yeah, I have no idea what the thought process with that film was. And I haven't seen the new Odyssey. There's a new Odyssey with Ray Fiennes. Really? Yeah, it doesn't look very, I mean, it's well cast, but just doesn't look very good. Like all the shots from the trailer were interiors. It looked oddly claustrophobic, which is.
I still say the best version of the Odyssey I've ever seen is the DuckTales one. So we're just gonna
go with that. Yeah, Ridley Scott isn't.
Quarters, pennies, nickels, dimes, come to us while there is still time. That's what the sirens sing to Scrooge McDuck. This is, and I haven't seen that episode since I was like 6. This is how much of an impression it made.
Yeah, Ridley Scott's fine, I guess. I don't even like Gladiator that much.
It's not that great.
It's not that good. I think it had a lot of energy.
Joaquin Phoenix is actually not bad in it.
He's a weird performance, though. Like, he's killing his dad and crying while he's killing his dad. It's a kind of odd
That part didn't work. All the stuff with
choice.
him didn't work. But I kind of liked. I mean, I think he does well. We'll get. I mean, when we get into sort of the madness of Nero, he gives a slightly more interesting, nuanced portrayal of madness in an emperor.
Yeah.
After the death, the whole death of killing Marcus Aurelius is weird. But the thing of like, why don't they love me? Like they should love me. Like I
Mm.
think that he gets a little bit better at the like anger at the people for not loving the emperor.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I like his performance a little more.
And that, yeah,
While
okay.
appreciating the fact that it's a little weird, but it's better than. And I like Djimon Hounsou in that movie. We talked about Djimon Hounsou last time. I actually like him in that movie too. But
Hmm. Yeah. I would take Gladiator for this film, but
oh, you
what
can't give it away.
what are you gonna do? Oh yeah.
We'll discuss how much we loved it.